army colonel who took over the government in a bloodless coup in the late 80s during the country's second civil war. He quickly dissolved the Sudanese parliament, he banned political parties, he introduced Islamic law, and became a military dictator. And in order to secure his power and fend off opposition, he assembled a group of militias here in the west of the country to make his own personal military force. This military force was led by a commander nicknamed Hemeti. So by the early 2000s, Sudan's dictator commands two armies, the Sudanese Armed Forces, but also this special unit of loyal fighters that he assembled from these militias. He uses this force to stamp out whoever he needs to in order to stay in power, especially over here in the Darfur region, where non-Arab groups felt neglected by the government and wanted to break away. But al-Bashir uses his special military force to massacre these rebels, leading to the mass murder of hundreds of thousands and displacing millions of people in the process. Al-Bashir eventually rebranded his personal army to be called the Rapid Support Forces, and it wasn't just an army. A trove of leaked bank and corporate documents show that this army is also a lucrative business empire that captures gold mines, runs smuggling operations, patrols the borders, and provides its fighters for hire in regional conflict, and facilitates a profitable gold trade with foreign powers like Russia and the United Arab Emirates. One document details the delivery of $30 million worth of gold bars from Sudan to Dubai from the company owned by Hemeti, the leader of this army. And this is a key part of this story, because in addition to helping al-Bashir, the dictator, stay in power, the RSF also made this warlord Hemeti super rich, because he was able to use his tens of thousands of soldiers to control both the gold market and the borders of Sudan. Okay, so it's 2005. The conflict in Darfur is just getting started, but the civil war that has been raging for decades between the north and the south comes to an end. By 2011, its result is a formal division. South Sudan finally breaks away and becomes the world's newest country.
A nation is born, a symbol of sovereignty and identity flies for the first time.
But with them, they take 75% of the oil reserves, a major blow to Sudan's economy. So inflation runs wild, food prices rise, and al-Bashir doesn't have enough money to continue his system of bribes and tributes to political elites in the military. The quality of life in Sudan plummets, and by 2019, they had had enough. All over the country, the people take to the streets and protest their dictator, demanding democracy. The Sudanese army and the RSF, these two separate military organizations, both see what's coming. They team up and overthrow al-Bashir, sending him to prison and taking over the government. It was the end of 2019, and Omar al-Bashir's 30 years of dictatorship drew to a close. And now, the Sudanese army leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, was in charge, closely followed by the RSF warlord billionaire Hemeti. They're cooperating in this transition, and they promise the protesters that they will eventually hand the country over to a civilian leader who will bring in a democracy. But the military leaders keep going back on their promise. They keep ruling the country for years, and they continuously abuse and massacre the protesters. This all comes to a head in December 2022, when al-Burhan agrees to indeed give control of the government back to the civilians, but he has one big condition. He wants the RSF to no longer be an independent military. He wants it to be folded into the official Sudanese army so that he would control it, not Hemeti. And this is where a conflict starts to brew. Hemeti, this warlord who has made hundreds of millions of dollars thanks to his command over this army, doesn't like this idea. He's not going to let his lucrative business military empire get swallowed by the government. So he decides that he only has one choice: to overthrow the government and lead the country himself. On April 15th, 2023, Hemeti sends 2,000 of his men to al-Burhan's personal residence, which is a military compound. It leads to a shootout where 35 guards are killed. Al-Burhan narrowly escapes, but the conflict spreads throughout the capital of Khartoum and the country as a whole. These two forces that the previous dictator used for different purposes, now fighting over who will rule the country. Tanks roll through the city and airstrikes boom in residential neighborhoods. Embassies empty as foreign countries evacuate their citizens. But for many Sudanese civilians, a quick escape isn't an option. There are no helicopter rescues, no international convoys coming for them. So they pack up and leave their homes, fleeing the conflict and heading to neighboring countries, Egypt, Chad, or South Sudan. And soon, this conflict that looks like it's just between these military generals struggling for control is actually turning into a war that the rest of the world has an eye on. Sudan is a geostrategically important country. It sits astride the Nile, which is the lifeline to Egypt. It's home to these ports near the vital choke points of our global economy, the Suez Canal and the Horn of Africa, where 10% of world trade passes through, including huge amounts of oil. Powerful countries around the globe are always trying to put military bases here. They want to control bases and ports simply because of its vital importance for global trade. Sudan is also loaded with resources: gold, zinc, silver, chromite, and iron. This is stuff that foreign countries want and need. So powerful countries are watching this military commander showdown and evaluating who they should support, who will best secure their interests in the future.
Gunfire in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, fractured Friday's start.
The United Arab Emirates is a huge player in all of this. They buy and refine the majority of Sudan's gold, and a lot of it comes from Hemeti and his military business empire. The UAE has also paid Hemeti to use some of his soldiers to fight on their side in Yemen. So there's this mutually beneficial alignment and relationship between these two. But the Sudanese armed forces also have fought in Yemen in recent years, and the UAE has made deals with the military government to secure ports and access to minerals. So the UAE is now in a situation where they've bolstered both sides of this now conflict. And then there's Libya, where this warlord Khalifa Haftar has strong connections to Hemeti. Hemeti has also loaned out some of his fighters to go to Libya to fight on Haftar's side. So now Haftar is returning the favor, supporting his warlord ally by sending fuel shipments to the RSF. Haftar is really important in all of this because if other countries like the UAE do decide to send money or weapons to Hemeti, they can use Haftar and his network as the middleman. In fact, this is already happening. Haftar is already working as a middleman to transfer supplies and weapons to the RSF on behalf of Russia. Yes, Russia is already here, in the form of the private military called the Wagner Group. They've been in Sudan for years, supplying training for the RSF in exchange for getting in on the lucrative gold trade in Sudan. And while Russia has also worked with the Sudanese army in the past, a recent CNN investigation shows that Russia is sending significant support for the RSF, implying that they've chosen a side in this conflict. But there doesn't seem to be any real loyalty here. Russia will likely shift to favor any leader who will likely win in this, who will support Russian interests and in facilitating their goal to eventually build a naval base here in the Red Sea. And then you've got the neighbor to the north, Egypt, who has to walk a fine line in how they support this conflict. Egypt more naturally aligns with the government and the military of Sudan, but they can't publicly be against the RSF. They can't choose a side quite yet. That's because the Egyptian economy is in trouble. Their currency has lost over half its value, and they've been asking for help from the UAE, who has sent them $100 billion in cash and other aid since 2013. It would be unwise for Egypt to be on the opposite side of the UAE on this. Their economy depends on them, so they're maintaining a mostly neutral stance for now. Ethiopia and Eritrea are both, for now, neutral, though Ethiopia has invited General al-Burhan to visit in recent months, and Eritrea invited his enemy Hemeti for a visit as well, signaling that they may land on opposite sides in the future of this conflict. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and the United States are offering to act as mediators, hoping for a peaceful resolution, and some are looking to China, who recently negotiated a deal with Saudi Arabia and Iran. China might use this as another moment to flex its new diplomatic muscles and broker a peace in Sudan. This conflict between two generals is more than it appears. It has the potential to spiral into a full-on proxy war, both by regional partners who bear the brunt of this conflict, but also foreign powers who care much more about securing their own interests than the devastating human effects of the conflict they are fueling. And worse, in Sudan, we see a conflict where the main players, these two generals, are both incentivized to keep playing the same game that the once dictator Omar al-Bashir designed, where a broken system delivers power and riches to a few at the top, incentivizing them to keep this system divided and broken, just as al-Bashir designed it. And in the process,